உலகத் தமிழ் உறவுகள் அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம்.
Today we are going to see what is the remedy available. The landlord gives some property to the tenant even after expiry of lease period. Recently, Supreme Court said even after expiry of lease period, the landlord accepts the rent from the tenant does not amount to waiver of the termination of lease. Here, in the case of K.M. Manjunath vs. Erappa 2022 Live Law SC 561 SLP C 10700 of 2022. Here, the suit for eviction filed by a landlord. Even after expiry of lease agreement, the landlord accepts rent from the tenant. The tenant took a contention there was no valid termination of tenancy as per this section 106 of Transfer of Property Act, because if the termination of lease agreement or agreement 15 days before the statutory notice, it should be sent by the lessor and lessee. But here, the landlord doesn't send a legal notice to the tenant for the termination of lease agreement. For that contention, accepted by the trial court and dismissed the suit. Thereafter, the landlord filed revision petition before the High Court. In the High Court said, in view of the section 111 of A of Transfer of Property Act, the termination of lease after expiry of lease agreement, there is no required to notice of termination of the lease agreement under the section 106 of Transfer of Property Act. So, the High Court allowing the revision petition, therefore, the defendant, the tenant, approached Apex Court filing the special leave petition before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, High Court rightly said, the mere acceptance of the rent by the landlord after expiry of the period of lease would not amount to waiver of the termination of lease. Supreme Court held that on expiry of term fixed under the deed, the tenant would not be entitled to statutory notice under the section 106 of the Transfer of Property Act, because the lease period was already expired, so the lease agreement already terminated. There is no further statutory notice required. Therefore, the Supreme Court dismissing the SLP and set aside the trial court order and upheld the High Court order. If the landlord accepts the rent from the tenant even after expiry of lease agreement, it is not amount to restore the lease agreement. The lease agreement period is expired. The agreement also terminated. There is no further statutory notice required. Even after expiry period of lease agreement, the landlord accept the rent also does not amount to restore the lease agreement. Thank you for watching this video.